On her 30th birthday, she received a gift no woman would ever want. A luxurious box wrapped in white silk, and inside divorce papers. "From all of us," her mother-in-law said, while her husband smiled into the camera, thinking it was the perfect joke. But they didn't know that gift would become the beginning of a legend. A story about awakening, self-respect, and the most beautiful gift a woman can ever give herself: freedom. Welcome to the gift of being underestimated. That afternoon, Seattle was draped in a light rain, the kind they call mist rain, soft as breath, yet enough to cling to your hair, dampen your shoulders, and slow the heartbeat of someone waiting. Alina Grace Owen stared at the window of Morello's, the restaurant glowing in warm light that felt more like an invitation than sincerity. In the glass, she saw herself neat in a beige dress, her hair in a low bun, a trace of red lipstick she couldn't recall applying. Maybe it was a habit, a polite mask for familiar performances. Inside, the Owen family was already seated. No one was ever late. The Owens always knew how to arrive on time and make others feel like they hadn't. Mitchell sat at the head of the table, between Constance and Vanessa, posture straight, glass in hand, a living statue of restraint. When Alina entered, he lifted his head and smiled faintly. "You're here. You're here." A simple phrase, but it landed like an ending. She smiled back and sat beside the place card marked with her name, the handwriting elegant, tilted, and deliberately condescending. The table gleamed with all the luxuries she no longer tasted: medium, rare steak, quinoa salad, Italian white wine, dark chocolate mousse, everything perfect, except feeling. Silence reigned, filled only by the clink of cutlery, strained laughter, Constance adjusting her napkin, and Mitchell taking a call, all blending into the soundtrack of pretense. "You know, darling," Constance finally said, her voice like cold honey, "your father-in-law wanted tonight to be special. We've all prepared this gift for you for quite some time." A waiter stepped forward, setting down a large silver gift box tied with a red ribbon. Constance smiled. "Happy birthday, dear. We hope you'll like it." Alina stared at the box. She didn't move. Time stretched. She could hear her heartbeat, each thud striking against memory. Whenever Constance said a special gift, it never meant anything pleasant. The first was a solo trip she arranged for Mitchell. The second is an IVF invoice to remind her of her biological shortcomings. This time, she already knew. It would be the end. "Open it," Vanessa said lightly, excitement dripping from her voice like someone waiting for a scene to unfold. Alina placed her hand on the red ribbon, took a slow breath, and pulled the metallic paper unfurled, scattering shards of light across the table, beautiful, cold, final. Inside was a stack of papers. At the top, a white folder is embossed with Steinberg and Associates logo. Mitchell set down his glass, his voice quiet, unsure if it carried pity or relief. "They're divorce papers." The words dropped like a stone breaking the surface of still water. Silence followed. Only the distant clatter of dishes from another table filled the void. Constance raised an eyebrow. "You see, dear, we want what's best for Mitchell. He needs the freedom to find real happiness. And you," she paused, smiling softly, "you deserve someone simpler." Alina looked up. Her eyes had no anger, only a stillness so deep it unsettled the room. She looked around the table, every face, every forced smile, every glance that refused to meet hers. Then she smiled, a genuine smile faint enough to make them think she hadn't grasped what was happening. "Actually," she said calmly, "I filed 2 weeks ago. But thank you for the gift. It's lovely." Mitchell froze. Constance's eyes widened. Vanessa's jaw dropped. The table turned to stone. Alina reached into her purse, pulled out a pen, and signed. The strokes were clean, decisive, slicing through years of performance. When she was done, she folded the papers and slid them toward Mitchell. "Here, you can file yours. That should speed things up." Then she stood. No tears, no trembling, no goodbye. Before leaving, she turned to Constance. "You're right. It is a special gift. It made me realize freedom can come wrapped in silver paper." Constance said nothing. Mitchell tried to call her name, but the sound died in his throat. When Alina stepped out, the rain was still falling. She didn't open her umbrella. Raindrops kissed her hair, her cheeks, mingling with the salt at the corner of her lips. Her beige dress grew heavy with water, yet each step felt lighter than the last. A soft voice, hers, drifted through the rain, as if speaking to whoever might listen. "Some gifts don't need to be opened to know what's inside." But once you do, you realize it's you who's finally set free. She stopped at a crosswalk, eyes on a distant sign. Capitol Hill Apartments. A small place, but hers, untouched. Headlights swept across her face, no longer the fragile wife of Mitchell Owen, but a woman learning to stand tall, even in the rain. That night, her apartment glowed softly against the grey Seattle sky. It was small, barely 60 square meters, but warm, neat, scented with cinnamon and vanilla. Her laptop was on the kitchen table, and a folder was on the screen. Project Grace. Inside, financial records, contracts, evidence, and emails she'd gathered over 2 years. Alina sat down, towel drying her hair, sipping hot tea. She opened the file labeled Phase 1, the first step of her plan, Reclaiming Myself. On the screen, the first line read, "Freedom doesn't come when they release you. It comes when you stop waiting for them to." A faint smile crossed her lips. The screen's light glowed across the face of a woman who'd just walked out of a battle no one knew she was fighting. She hit send. The first email went out to patricia.gaines@outlook.com. Then she opened another tab, her private blog, one she'd written quietly for months, The Gift of Being Underestimated. The first post was ready. They thought I was weak, but they never knew in silence. I learned how to become unbreakable. Her hand hovered over the mouse for a second, then clicked publish. The soft click rang out small, yet it sounded like liberation. She stood and stepped onto the balcony. The rain hadn't stopped. City lights shimmered through droplets like thousands of stories waiting to be told. She whispered, almost smiling, "Happy birthday, Alina. Welcome back." Down below, car horns echoed faintly. Seattle stayed awake, and so did she. By tomorrow, the city would know the gift of being underestimated, not just as a blog, but as a voice. And tonight, in that small, rain-washed apartment, sat a woman who had finally shed everything and found herself smiling at her scars. The next morning, Seattle was still wrapped in mist. Soft sunlight slipped through the curtains, touching the thin smoke rising from a cup of coffee. Alina sat by the window, wrapped in a pale grey sweater. No voices, no background music of pretense, only the sound of her breathing and the faint rain tapping against the glass. She opened a small notebook. On the first page, 3 words. Phase 2, Foundation. The next page held a long list: private bank accounts, business license applications, office lease contracts, and old contacts in financial consulting. Each item is marked in color: blue for done, yellow for in progress, red for yet to begin. Her pen moved steadily, no hesitation, no need to look anything up. Every detail, every number, already lived in her mind. She had been preparing for this day for 2 years, ever since she realized her marriage was just a soulless contract. Her laptop glowed softly. The Grace Consulting logo filled the screen, a company quietly registered under her birth name, Alina Grace Carter. No one in the Owen family knew. The company was built from experience, the years she'd lived as a contract wife, managed by money and reputation. She knew what women needed when love was no longer offered, and she decided to create a place where they could begin again, not as victims, but as rebuilders. That morning, an email arrived from Patricia Gaines. The subject line read simply, "I'm ready." Alina opened it. "Alina, I read the blog. You're the one behind it. Thank you for writing the things I never dared to say. I'm ready." She smiled. Her fingers danced over the keys. "Welcome to the Foundation." She hadn't chosen that name by chance. Foundation, a word that meant base, fund, and home. She knew survival required rebuilding from the ground up, not with revenge but self-understanding. She stood and poured another cup of coffee. Her small kitchen was neat to the point of stillness. Jars of oats, a candle jar, a few photos of Seattle's morning sky. Every morning, she repeated one quiet ritual. "I'm not starting over. I'm just continuing where I was forced to stop." Her phone buzzed, a video call from Imani Foster, a woman she'd met through an online support group. "You really did it, Alina." Imani's voice held both awe and admiration. "I didn't do it for them to see," Alina said. "I did it so I could breathe. Will you show them someday?" "No need. When you stand still long enough, truth finds its way." After the call, she opened a new file. The network plan. A list began forming: women hurt by the Owen family. Not for revenge, but to prove that scars don't make us weaker, they make us wiser. She started typing the next blog entry. "They say women only endure, but we're waiting until we're calm enough to act." Calmness isn't weakness. It's strength, sharpened. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. For the first time in years, Alina opened the curtains wide. Light poured in, washing over her bare, unpainted face. Sometimes, dawn doesn't need to blaze. It only needs to arrive when you're ready to see it. A week later, Alina stepped into her new office, the 8th floor of an old Aurora Avenue building overlooking Lake Union. No signboard, no receptionist, just a thin steel plaque by the door. Grace Consulting. She liked its humility, quiet but honest. On the first day, only 2 people were Alina and Leah Thompson, an independent lawyer who'd helped with her divorce paperwork. Leah was tall, curly-haired, with warm brown eyes, another survivor of a manipulative marriage. "I didn't think you'd go this big, Alina," Leah said, scanning the documents on the desk. "It's not big," Alina smiled. "It's just real. And how long do you plan to keep this from them? Until they have to find me themselves." They laughed softly, but freely. The sound wasn't loud, yet it carried the echo of women who no longer feared. That afternoon, Alina checked the blog. The gift box had reached nearly 1 million views. In the comments, thousands of women wrote, "I was hurt too. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. They call us weak, but really we've just been silent too long." She read every line, replying to none, but saving each one brick by brick, the proper foundation she was building. Night fell. Seattle rained again. Alina sat writing plans to expand Grace Foundation, a small fund to support women seeking legal help after divorce. She drew from her savings and from private shares Mitchell never knew existed, transferring small amounts into a new account. Every number was a piece of her life reclaimed. The phone rang, an unknown number. She answered. "Do you know Mrs. Alina Owen?" A young woman's trembling voice asked. "I saw your blog. I'm in the same situation. What's your name?" "Kesha Price." "You're not alone, Kesha. Tell me your story." They spoke for nearly an hour. After hanging up, Alina added a new name to her list. Kesha Price, former housekeeper at Owen Estate, fired for false theft charges. Next to it, she wrote a note. "Pain deserves to be told." Then she opened another file. Invisible Network, Phase 1. Names began to fill the screen. Rhonda Keller, Patricia Gaines, Imani Foster, Yolanda Hart, and Kesha Price. Women were once forced into silence. Alina looked at the list and exhaled, not out of relief, but realization this was her proper foundation. Not the company, not the money, but the souls brave enough to speak. Near midnight, she typed one last line into her digital journal. "I'm no longer afraid of being alone, because in the dark, I've learned I was never the only one lighting a candle." Then she closed the laptop and turned off the lights. Seattle slept under rain while in a small apartment on Capitol Hill, where the foundation of something powerful had quietly been laid. No noise, no applause, just the steady rhythm of keys tapping like the heartbeat of someone reborn. The narration softened, like a breath after a storm. "When they thought I was collapsing, I was rebuilding. One brick each night. No one saw it, making it stronger than any castle they've ever owned." 3 days after the first post on the gift of being underestimated went live, Seattle seemed to wake up. What began as one woman's quiet confession spread faster than anyone could have imagined. News sites picked it up, women's groups shared it, and the comments poured in thick and unending, like autumn rain. One line was shared more than any other. "When they think they're bringing you down, sometimes they're just digging the ground for you to rise higher." No one knew who the writer was. She only signed her initials, AG, short for Alina Grace. That morning, Alina rose early, made coffee, and opened her laptop. 3.2 million views. She didn't panic. She didn't cheer. She just sat there, staring at the number blinking on the screen, like a heartbeat echoing from somewhere far away. Her phone buzzed endlessly, messages from Leah, Imani, and strangers sending their thanks. One message made her stop and breathe for a long while. "Thank you for speaking for those who were told we weren't enough. I read every word and cried." She smiled. She wasn't alone, not for validation, but because she finally knew. Across town, in the Owen Estate mansion, Constance Owen sat frozen before the morning news. A special report opened on screen with a video footage from a birthday dinner. Sitting before the silver box, Alina's face was calm, and her smile was as sharp as a blade. The anchor spoke. "A video has been shared over 5 million times in 24 hours. The woman in the clip, believed to be the wife of Mitchell Owen, son of Owen and Company's founder, was handed divorce papers during her birthday celebration. Constance shot up, pale and trembling. "Mitchell." He walked in, buttoning his shirt, voice weary. "What is it, Mom? Explain this," she snapped, throwing the iPad onto the table. "Who recorded it? Who posted it?" Mitchell looked at the screen. The video froze at the moment. Alina smiled and said, "Thank you. This is the most honest gift you've ever given me." He said nothing. Vanessa strolled in, her tone dry. "She's got the whole city talking. The woman who got divorced on her birthday. Perfect tragedy for their morning coffee." Constance's voice turned razor sharp. "We need to control this. Call legal. Call PR. Now." Mitchell nodded, but his eyes stayed on the screen as Alina signed her name, steady and free. Something inside him shifted, faint, uneasy, like guilt waking up. He remembered that look in her eyes. No anger, no begging, only release. While the Owens scrambled for damage control, Alina sat quietly at her desk, writing. "They ask why I didn't fight back when I was humiliated. I answer, because sometimes silence is the loudest reply. It makes those who hurt you listen to their own echoes." She hit publish. No caption, no comment. Moments later, a message appeared from Angela Rivera, a TV reporter. "If you're willing to tell your story, I'd love to hear it." Alina recognized the name. Angela had been at the restaurant that night, the woman who accidentally recorded that video. Alina tilted her head, smiled slightly, and typed back, "I don't need an interview. They'll tell the story themselves when the time comes." Her voice, soft as wind over a lake. "I didn't create the storm. I just opened the window so they could see it was raining." 2 weeks later, the entire country knew about the woman in the birthday video. Morning talk shows, marriage podcasts, online columns, all are asking the same question. Who is she? People began searching for the real identity of AG. Hashtags spread like wildfire. The gift box, egg story, freedom is beautiful. Women across America posted their photos holding pens, eyes steady, with one caption, "For AG." Mitchell moved through work under a strange silence. At Owen & Co., colleagues avoided his eyes. That night, he met with the PR team. A young associate spoke carefully. "Sir, there are rumors that the woman in the video is your wife. We need a statement to control the narrative." "There's nothing to confirm," he said flatly. "But if it's true, the company's image could..." He cut her off. "Not your concern." When he returned home, Constance was studying with their lawyer. "We'll send a cease and desist to that blog," she said. "If needed, we'll sue for defamation." "Mother," Mitchell said quietly. "She never mentioned anyone's name. She didn't lie." "Mitchell," Constance's voice was ice. "She humiliated this family publicly." "No," he said. "We did that ourselves." For a long moment, they stared at each other. And for the first time in years, Mitchell couldn't defend what they'd done. Later that night, he sat alone in his study, laptop open. He found the gift of being underestimated. Under every post, thousands of comments. She never replied, but each word she wrote carried the weight of truth. He reread one line, over and over. "I used to think love meant sacrifice. But when sacrifice goes unseen, it becomes disappearance." He turned off the screen, resting his head in his hands. Outside, rain drummed softly against the window, the same Seattle rain that once annoyed him, now oddly comforting. At Grace Consulting, Alina was receiving hundreds of emails a day. She didn't try to manage it. She read, sorted, and saved the ones that felt true. One message made her eyes sting. "Dear A.G., I'm 47. My husband has dismissed me for 20 years. Today I finally walked out because you did first." She whispered, "Thank you for believing." Angela Rivera messaged again. "The woman in that video has changed how people see divorce. Do you know what you're doing?" Alina typed back, "I'm not changing anyone. I'm just saying what they've been trying not to hear." Outside, the storm of attention raged on. But Alina knew this wasn't a storm meant to destroy. It was rain meant to cleanse, to wash away the masks, the rehearsed smiles, and the bonds built from control. Her voice closed this chapter, low and steady, more reflection than speech. "When they called me weak, they didn't know silence is a strength. It forces them to hear their own voices echo in the void. And sometimes, that echo is the clearest answer of all." It was another gray, cold weekend afternoon in Seattle. Bluefinch Cafe sat tucked away in a narrow Capitol Hill alley, warm light spilling through the windows, the air sweet with the scent of waffles. The bell above the door chimed softly as Alina stepped in, unwinding her cream scarf and scanning the room. In the far corner, a woman with deep brown skin and tightly curled hair tied up high waved at her. Imani Foster. "You came." Imani smiled, her voice rich and warm. "I thought you might not. I always show up when someone says, 'We need to talk,'" Alina replied, steady and calm. 5 untouched cups of coffee sat on the table. Imani nodded toward them. One by one, the others arrived, taking seats around the small round table. Rhonda Keller had short hair and sharp eyes, the kind that had seen too many battles. Patricia Gaines was composed in a black suit, but her gaze carried the scars of memory. Kesha Price, the youngest, maybe 25, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her cup. And finally, Yolanda Hart, dressed and clear-eyed, once a university lecturer, now a private tutor. For a few seconds, no one spoke, only the low hum of the espresso machine and a faint jazz melody from the corner. Rhonda broke the silence. "I used to work as Bernard Owen's secretary. 10 years ago. They made me disappear with fake fraud charges, but I kept copies of every accounting file. I know what they did." Patricia took a sip of coffee, her voice low. "They paid me to get rid of a pregnancy. His son promised he'd take care of me, but I had the baby anyway. You've met him, Jordan." She looked straight at Alina. "I know who you are. A.G." Alina nodded slightly, neither confirming nor denying, just a quiet acknowledgement. Yolanda spoke next. "I taught at the private school that Constance funded. When I caught her daughter plagiarizing, they fired me. No school has hired me since." Kesha looked down. "I was their housemaid. One day, a necklace went missing. They blamed me. I went to jail for 8 months. No one believed I was innocent." Imani set her hands flat on the table. "Enough. None of us has to be quiet anymore." Alina looked around at the women, every face, every story, realizing they were all fragments of a picture she'd only glimpsed from afar. Now they were together in a small cafe, not to seek revenge, but to be seen, to be believed, to exist. "I don't want them to fall," Alina said softly. Her voice was low and deliberate. "I just want them to look at themselves in the mirror." "So what do you plan to do?" Rhonda asked. "Tell the story. No judgment, no hate, just truth, and let people see it for what it is." Something shifted in the room then. Light from the window caught their faces, a faint, golden ring connecting them. Alina continued, almost whispering, "We are invisible women, but they can't pretend not to see when we stand together." The jazz faded into a slow piano tune. Kesha wiped her tears. Rhonda placed a hand on her shoulder. Patricia smiled, the kind of smile that comes after fear finally leaves. Imani looked at Alina. "When I read your post, 'Silence is Power,' I realized you're building something bigger than yourself." "No," Alina said quietly. "I'm just rebuilding myself." The narrator's voice drifted softly. "Sometimes, strength doesn't come from shouting. It comes from small voices together, long enough to become an echo." After that first meeting, the invisible women gathered weekly. No office, no title. Sometimes at the cafe, in the public library, and in Alina's small Capitol Hill apartment. Each meeting was a story, a fragment, a piece of evidence, but more than that, a moment of healing. One rainy night, Alina placed a small board in the center of her living room. Across the top, she wrote, "They don't need to fall, they need to be seen." Below it stretched a web of names, dates, files, and connections, red lines linking everything together like a quiet, intricate map. "It all starts here," Rhonda said, pointing to the center. "Owen and Co. Everything leads back. But they're still seen as saints," Yolanda said. "People think Constance is the golden woman of charity." "Then we'll just show them the other side of the coin," Alina replied. "No need to break it, just flip it." Laughter broke out, short, soft, the kind that comes when fear finally loosens its grip. Patricia opened her laptop and showed a file. Here, her interview from 5 years ago. She says, "I've always fought for women." Rhonda clicked on an audio recording. Constance's voice echoed, cold and sharp. "Women are burdens. If my son was smart, he'd have chosen someone else." No one spoke for a while. Then Kesha whispered, "Are we going to release all this?" "No," Alina said, smiling gently. "We'll let the truth walk out on its own. I'll tell it my way, and no one can sue the truth." That night, Alina opened her laptop. She posted a new entry on her blog. The invisible ones. I met them, the ones forced to be quiet. None of them is weak. They were taught to whisper to survive. The post spread within hours. Hundreds of women began sharing their own stories. Social media named them the Invisible Network. Alina read every message, recording each name. Not to use, but to remember. Because each one was a life. A heartbeat in the foundation of something real. Late one night, Rhonda sent a message. Just heard Constance is planning to sue whoever's behind the blog. They think it's you. Alina replied, good. Fear makes people confess what they've been hiding. Then she turned off her phone and stepped onto the balcony. Rain fell steadily, glimmering against the reflection of the lake beyond. She closed her eyes, listening to the city breathe. Alina realized in that darkness that the storm was no longer hers alone. It now carried the voices of thousands, and each was a thread in this invisible network, quiet, unstoppable, alive. The voiceover ended gently, warm as candlelight. We never wanted revenge. We only wanted to be seen. Because sometimes, justice doesn't need a gunshot. It just needs light cast in the right place. Monday morning at Owen & Co. was thick with tension. Rumors of a financial investigation rippled through every floor. Mitchell walked in, shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes, holding a brown envelope stamped from Portland, Oregon. The handwriting on the front leaned slightly to the right. Mr. Mitchell Andrew Owen. Confidential. He tore it open carefully. Inside was a folded letter. Dear Mr. Owen, my name is Jordan Gaines. I'm 16. My mother is Patricia Gaines. She said you two knew each other long ago. I don't want to cause trouble. I only need medical history from my father's side. My doctor says it's essential for my treatment. I don't need anything else. Thank you. Sincerely, Jordan Gaines. Mitchell's hands trembled. That name, Patricia Gaines, hit him like a door to the past swinging open. He remembered exactly who she was. The woman his mother had forced him to leave, calling her unfit for a man with your future. The last time he saw Patricia was in a rainy parking lot. She'd said only one thing, don't regret this, Mitch. And now, 16 years later, the past had found its way back, written in the careful handwriting of a girl. He called his mother. Mom, I got a letter from Patricia's daughter. Constance's voice came sharp and cold over the line. Nonsense, sir. She's after money. No, I need to see her. Mitchell, she snapped. I handled that 16 years ago. There was no child. His heart stuttered. Handled? He repeated quietly. What does that mean? Don't be foolish. I told her to get rid of it. I paid her well. Silence. Mitchell's hand loosened. The phone slipped from his grasp. Around him, the noise of the office faded away. He looked down at the letter, at the handwriting of a girl who didn't ask for money, didn't demand anything, just the truth. That night, Mitchell drove 3 hours to Portland. Rain streaked across the windshield, the streetlights blurring like memories he couldn't clean away. At the entrance of St. Mary's Hospital, he saw a tall, slender girl sitting alone by a vending machine, hugging her backpack. Her dark hair fell around her face and her eyes were his. Jordan, he said softly. She looked up. I'm Mitchell Owen. She studied him momentarily, no fear, tears, or shock. I know. Mom said you might come. He swallowed hard. How is your mother? She's fine. She didn't want me to send that letter, but I needed to know. Her voice was calm, but unyielding, the kind that didn't ask for sympathy. He held up the letter. Your doctor said you needed medical records? Yes. I have a mild heart condition, genetic. They need information about my father's side. Mitchell's chest tightened. Do you know who I am? I do, she said plainly. I don't need a father. I need the truth. A chill swept through the parking lot, and Mitchell finally understood. She wasn't here for love. She was here for the right to know, the right stolen from her the day she was born. She stood, pulling on her backpack. Thank you for coming. I didn't think you actually would. Jordan, wait. You don't owe me anything, she said, voice steady. But maybe you owe my mother an apology. The words struck him like stone. She turned and walked into the rain, her silhouette fading in the grey Portland night. Mitchell stood there, rain soaking his face. He couldn't tell if it was water or tears anymore. The narrator's voice softened. Some meetings aren't meant to heal. They exist to hold a mirror to what we've run from. And sometimes, The eyes of a child are enough to make a man realize just how weak his strength has been. The next day, Mitchell drove to the address in the letter, a small house on the edge of Portland. When the door opened, Patricia stood there. Her hair carried threads of grey now, but her eyes strong, honest, unpainted, were the same. "Hello, Mitch," she said quietly, as if no time had passed. I don't even know what to say." "Then don't. Come in." The home was simple, warm, filled with the scent of pine. On the walls hung photos, Jordan as a little girl, laughing, holding her mother's hand. No man in any frame. Patricia poured 2 cups of coffee and set one before him. "Your mother sent people years ago. They brought money. I didn't take it. I left Seattle and kept my child. Why didn't you tell me?" "You already knew," she said. "You chose silence." He looked down. Shame crept up his throat. Her voice was gentle but steady. "I don't hate you, but someone else already knew the truth, someone who helped Jordan when things got hard." Mitchell looked up. "Who?" "Alina." The name cut through him like glass. "She knew? She found me 3 years ago. Said she wanted nothing to do with your family, but she wanted Jordan to have healthcare coverage." Mitchell's breath caught. My God. He saw her again, Alina, that night in the restaurant, her calm eyes, her quiet grace. Even after betrayal, she had still chosen kindness. Patricia smiled faintly. She didn't say much, just left a check and a note, because no girl should pay for the mistakes of grown people. Mitchell's voice cracked. "I don't deserve that kind of grace." "No one does," Patricia said softly. "Forgiveness isn't earned. You only touch it when you're brave enough to face what you've done." The words hollowed him out, gentle, but mercilessly true. He stood and looked around the small house, everything ordinary, but built with the one thing the Owens had never possessed: truth and quiet decency. Driving back to Seattle, he turned on the radio. A familiar song played, "Let Her Go." He let out a soft laugh through his tears. For the first time, he understood. Love doesn't die in betrayal. It dies the moment you're too afraid to face what you broke. Back in Seattle, Alina sat at her kitchen table, reading the latest article by Angela Rivera in the Seattle Post. Sources confirm that an anonymous woman behind the viral blog, The Gift of Being Underestimated, has been quietly supporting women and children for the past 2 years. She seeks no credit, only to do what's right, in silence. Alina folded the newspaper and took a sip of tea. She didn't need recognition. It was enough to know that a girl named Jordan was finally living freely somewhere. The voice that closed this chapter was warm, steady, like a breath of forgiveness. Some things we do not want to be seen, but to remind ourselves we haven't lost our kindness. And sometimes, that quiet kindness is the most beautiful revenge we can offer the past. 3 months after the meeting in Portland, Mitchell Owen returned to Seattle carrying a kind of exhaustion no suit could disguise. The Owen & Co. headquarters no longer gleamed the way it once had. More empty desks, more averted eyes. The mirrored glass walls reflected a man who barely looked like himself, thinner, hollow-eyed, disheveled. That Monday morning, his personal assistant handed in her resignation. "I'm sorry, Mr. Owen," she said quietly, leaving her badge on the desk. "I just can't stand watching what they did to your wife." Then she walked out, leaving only silence behind. As he passed through the lower floors, young employees whispered. One voice murmured, "That's him, the husband from the video." He heard it. He didn't turn around. Constance Owen sat perfectly still in the boardroom, posture erect, pearl necklace gleaming, voice honed by decades of control. "Mitchell," she said, "I heard Patricia has been talking to the press. If they find out you have an illegitimate child, we're finished." "Mother," he said slowly, "we've been finished for a long time." Her eyes snapped up. "You dare speak to me like that?" "I do. Because you were never a mother, only a puppeteer." "Mitchell, don't you see? Everything's collapsing not because of Alina or Patricia, but because we've never told the truth." He left the room. Behind him, Constance sat frozen, trapped inside a silence she could no longer command. That afternoon, Mitchell drove aimlessly until he ended up at Lake Union, the same place he and Alina used to walk when they were first married. The bridge was still there. The water is still grey and endless. The wind carried the same faint salt. He sat on a wooden bench and stared at his reflection in the rippling water. No tailored suit, no power, just a man staring at a stranger in the mirror of the lake. His phone buzzed. It was his brother, Trevor. "Bro, Mom's losing it. The company's under investigation. Are you okay? Yeah. What about the money? Keep your share. I don't want mine. You're insane. No, Trevor. For once, I'm awake. He hung up the cold wind bit into his collar. He looked back down at the water and thought, all my life, I saw people through my mother's eyes. Maybe I never truly saw anyone at all. The narration softened, heavy with quiet remorse. Sometimes punishment doesn't come from the world. It comes when you're forced to live with yourself, no excuses, no lies. That's when silence becomes truly terrifying. A week later, Owen estate stood nearly empty. Vanessa had moved out with her children after filing for divorce. Trevor had flown overseas to lie low. Bernard Owen was hospitalized after a stroke. And Constance, she sat in her leather chair, eyes fixed on the TV. A breaking news segment filled the screen. The fall of Owen and Co. The reporter's voice was calm but merciless. After over 40 years, Owen and Co. faces allegations of financial fraud and tax evasion. Former employees have released recordings linking company leadership, including Chairman Bernard Owen, to multiple cover-ups. Constance turned off the TV, her hand trembling. Mitchell stepped into the room. You should rest, Mother. Look at it, she whispered. Everything your father built, gone. It didn't fall today, Mitchell said quietly. It fell the day we started pretending. Her eyes flashed between anger and fear. Don't you dare side with them. You're an Owen. He smiled faintly, sad, but free. No, Mother. I'm just Mitchell, and for the first time, that feels right. She said nothing, just sat there, staring into the distance, a powerful woman finally defeated by her own reflection. That night, Mitchell packed a single suitcase, a few books, a coat, and an old wedding photo. In it, Alina was smiling softly, eyes full of quiet faith. He, meanwhile, was looking away. Only now did he realize, even on their happiest day, he was already lost. He drove through the rainy streets until he reached Capitol Hill. Her apartment window glowed with warm light. He stopped the car but didn't knock. Through the window, he saw her sitting at her desk, writing, golden light falling across her hair. Her face was peaceful, whole. He couldn't bring himself to interrupt that. He turned to leave, and in the glass of a shop window across the street, he caught his own reflection. Gowned, tired, eyes shadowed, but for the first time, unafraid. The narration came like a breath beneath the sound of Seattle rain. I used to think losing everything was the end, but maybe it's only when the mirror finally shows who you are. And that person isn't a monster, just someone who stayed silent for too long. He walked away, his figure melting into the wet, silver streets. Rain began to fall harder. For the first time, Mitchell didn't run from it. He let it wash over him, as if allowing it to strip everything false away, leaving only the truth beneath, raw and late, but real. One March morning, while clearing out his old apartment, Mitchell Owen received a small envelope with no return address. Inside was a silver key and a single handwritten note. Unit 47, 2nd Avenue, South Seattle. Open it when you're ready to face yourself. No signature, but he knew only Alina could write short words and make them cut that deeply. That afternoon, he drove to the city's edge, to a quiet storage facility called Safe Keep Storage. No reporters, no assistants, just the hum of his car engine and the cold weight of a key trembling in his hand. He stopped in front of Unit 47. The silver lock glinted under a thin film of dust. Mitchell took a slow breath and slid the key in. The following click was dry and final, the sound of a verdict beginning. He lifted the door. Inside was not a dark, forgotten room, but something carefully built, almost tender. A small, spotless space, lit by a single lamp. Photos, letters, receipts, notes, and cards covered the walls, arranged like a museum of memory. In the center stood a white table with a single sign. If you're reading this, I believe you're ready. The light flickered over his face, pale, worn, older than his years. He stepped closer and touched the first photograph. It was their wedding photo. Alina smiled, her hand in his. Beneath it, a note in her handwriting. The day I believed love could heal anything. The next photo, then the next, then the next. Moments from a marriage he barely remembered, birthdays, dinners, seaside trips, group photos, but under each one, a caption, a quiet truth he'd never seen. You asked me to laugh more softly. Your mother hated loud laughter. I made your favorite meal. You didn't come. Your mother needed new curtains. The day I lost our third child, you were with her. Mitchell staggered back, breathing unevenly. Each photo was a blade cutting without drawing blood, leaving only an ache. He turned and saw stacks of boxes, each labeled neatly. Year 1 letters. Year 3 restaurant receipts, from dinners he never remembered, but she clearly did. Year 5, an audio recording. On the desk sat a small laptop. Across its screen, a note read, "Play me." He sat down. His hands shook as he pressed play. The screen lit up with Alina's face, younger, softer, eyes still bright with belief. She spoke slowly, her voice calm. "If you're watching this, I've already gone, or you've lost enough to face what you've done finally." Her tone was steady, not bitter, just heartbreak made gentle. "Mitchell, I don't hate you. I only grieve for the man you could have been. You were brilliant, capable, kind. You just gave your heart to someone who didn't know how to use it." The video faded. Then another started. Alina again, thinner now, tired, her voice almost a whisper. "I was at the hospital today, alone. I lost the baby, the third one. The nurse asked where the father was. I said, 'He's busy.' And as I said it, I realized this marriage only ever had one participant." Mitchell stopped the video and lowered his head to the table. No tears came, only emptiness, cold and clean. On the table lay another note in her handwriting. "I kept everything not for revenge, but so I'd never doubt my memory again. If you're here, know this: I forgave you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting." The narration rose, soft as wind through a window. Sometimes people only change when they're forced to face themselves, not through accusation, but through the quiet evidence of truth. Mitchell scanned the room one last time. Then he noticed a cream-colored envelope labeled, "For Mitchell." Inside was her final letter. "Mitchell, I didn't write this to hurt you, but to remind you that someone once believed you could be better. Don't live chained to guilt. Live differently. Be the kind of man the boy named Jordan could look at and not feel ashamed. I'm not waiting. I'm not angry. I'm free. And I hope one day you'll be too. Alina." Mitchell sank to the floor, clutching the letter. Not out of grief, but realization. She had won, not through revenge, but through forgiveness. By walking away, quietly, and leaving him alone with the truth. He left the storage unit as dusk fell. Seattle was veiled in mist, the streetlights blurred like tears against the windshield. He stopped at a small park nearby. In the public restroom, a cracked mirror hung above a flickering light. He turned it on. A gaunt face stared back, pale, hollow-eyed, unshaven. He whispered to the reflection, "This is you. No titles, no mother, no one left to blame." He looked deeper into his own eyes, and then something shifted. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel disgust. He felt pity for the man who'd been lost for so long. The narrator's voice lowered, almost like a breath. When a person learns to have compassion for themselves, no one else has to forgive them anymore. Mitchell stepped back outside. Rain had begun to fall again, soft, cleansing, alive. The air smelled of wet earth, of renewal. He pulled out his phone and typed a message. "Thank you. For everything. I won't make you ashamed again." No reply came. He didn't expect one, because some answers don't need to return. They only need to be understood. On a bright May morning, the headlines hit every major newspaper at once. Owen and Co. Under federal investigation for fraud and bribery. The front page showed Bernard Owen being escorted out of his office, his face pale and hollow. Behind him, Constance Owen stood in dark glasses, lips pressed thin. A small caption below read, "Internal sources confirm that key evidence was provided by former executive assistant Rhonda Keller." The name froze Mitchell in place. He remembered Rhonda, his father's secretary, the woman who'd vanished 10 years ago after being accused of embezzlement. He'd been the one who signed her dismissal letter at his mother's command. And now she had returned, not for revenge, but for truth. That night, Mitchell sat alone in his small apartment, the television flickering against the walls. The news anchor's voice was calm, unhurried. "The federal court has opened a financial investigation into Owen and Co. Reports suggest the company maintained covert funds for government contract manipulation over several years." He turned the TV off and poured himself a drink. But as he looked into the glass, he saw his own reflection, worn, aged, directionless. There was no reason left to drink. He set the glass down and whispered to himself, "It's time," At Capitol Hill, Alina received a call from Leah, her lawyer and closest ally. Rhonda turned in all the recordings, Leah said. She told investigators she found her courage because of the invisible network. Alina was silent. "Are you all right?" Leah asked gently. "I'm fine," Alina said. "I never wanted them to suffer. I just wanted justice to have a name." That night, she posted on her blog, "Sometimes, you don't need to push anyone down. You have to stop holding them up." The post went viral within hours. Women across the country shared it, calling her movement the Quiet Revolution. Alina didn't reply to any of them. She just sat by the window, watching the rain trail down the glass, the city lights soft against her calm reflection. Meanwhile, the Owen family fell apart in public view. Trevor Owen, the youngest son, was arrested for money laundering. When forged documents were exposed, Vanessa Owen, Constance's daughter, lost custody of her children. Bernard Owen lay unconscious in the hospital after a massive stroke, and Constance, the woman who once ruled Seattle through reputation and fear, now sat alone in her empty mansion, dialing numbers no one answered. When a reporter came knocking, "Mrs. Owen, do you have a statement about the allegation?" She gave a thin smile. "No one in my family did anything wrong. We just trusted the wrong people." But in her eyes panic, because she knew exactly who that wrong person was, the one she had dismissed, belittled, and underestimated. Alina Grace Owen. The media storm lasted for weeks. Everything the Owens had built on status and charity collapsed not through scandal or sabotage, but under the quiet, heavy weight of truth. No one had to lift a hand. Justice did what it always does. Waited. The narration came steady and low, like a diary written after a storm. Justice never rushes. It arrives when we are still enough to see it. And sometimes, the one who causes destruction isn't the whistleblower. It's the one who hid the truth too long. 2 months later, newspapers printed the final image of the Owen estate seized and shuttered. Once symbols of power, the iron gates stood locked and streaked with moss. Inside, furniture tagged for auction, and the grand family portrait faded under dust. They said Constance had begun selling her jewelry to survive. Mitchell never went back. He rented a small apartment near Green Lake, where he walked each morning, no phone, no television. He began to write, not about Alina, not about himself, but about what he had never understood. He titled the manuscript, "Letters to the Woman I Failed." One evening, he mailed it to a publisher named M.A. Owen. Weeks later, a single advance copy arrived at Alina's door, wrapped with a note in his handwriting. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I hope this story helps someone else avoid becoming us." She read it in silence. On the last page, he had written, "I once thought Alina was the weakest person I knew, but she did the one thing I never could: walk away without needing to prove she was right." Alina closed the book gently and placed it between volumes on psychology and women's rights on her shelf. Then she stepped onto the balcony. The sun was setting the city glowing gold under autumn light. Children played in the street below. A few men walked their dogs. Seattle, at last, was peaceful. Behind her, Leah appeared with a folder in hand. "Alina, the funds approved. The Grace Foundation is now officially operating in 3 states. Thank you, Leah. Should we hold a launch event?" Alina smiled. "No. The real beginnings always happen quietly." She signed the papers, then looked up at the small framed quote on her wall. Nevertheless, she persisted. Her smile deepened, soft but certain. "They lost everything," she whispered. "I only lost an illusion." The narration faded in like the end of a film, gentle and clear. People say karma is punishment, but to me, it's a mirror. Those who sow deceit will live with its echo. Those who sow kindness will see peace grow from the ashes. Alina turned off the office lights and stepped outside. On her desk remained a single sheet of paper with the words written across it: "The gift of being underestimated ends with freedom." Outside, Seattle was turning to autumn. Golden leaves drifted across the sidewalk. Sunlight slid through glass towers, falling on the face of a woman who had finally completed her journey, not by defeating anyone, but by no longer losing herself. Early autumn wrapped Seattle in a cool, gentle hush. The trees along University Avenue were turning gold, the air scented faintly with coffee drifting from the small cafes lining the street. At the entrance of the University of Washington, a large banner fluttered in the breeze: "Annual Alumni Conference 2025. Guest speaker, Alina Grace Carter. People stopped to take photos, whispering and curious. Few knew that Alina Grace Carter once belonged to Alina Owen, the woman who had turned her silence into a revolution. Inside the auditorium, hundreds of guests were finding their seats. In the last row sat Mitchell Owen. He wore a simple white shirt, no tie, entourage, or cameras. He came alone, like someone returning to the scene of a memory, unsure if it still belonged to him. When the lights dimmed, soft music began to play. Alina walked onto the stage. She wore a navy blue dress, her hair tied low, her smile calm. Under the spotlight, she looked like someone surrounded by quiet strength. Applause filled the hall. She stood at the podium, pausing before speaking, the kind of pause that draws a room into stillness. 10 years ago, she began, I sat in the last row back there. Her hand gestured vaguely toward the crowd where Mitchell sat, though she never looked directly at him. I didn't know who I wanted to be. I only knew I was disappearing, piece by piece, trying to please everyone else. The hall went silent. Then I learned something. Some losses are gifts. Because when you lose an illusion, you finally touch the truth. A woman in the front row raised her hand. Are you talking about your blog, The Gift of Being Underestimated? Alina smiled faintly. Maybe. But I think everyone here has their own gift. Sometimes it comes wrapped as failure, betrayal, or divorce. But you'll find freedom inside if you're brave enough to open it. Applause swelled through the room. A middle-aged woman wiped her eyes. A young student scribbled notes in a rush. From the back row, Mitchell listened, hands clasped tightly. Every word she spoke felt like it belonged to him, though she never said his name. And in that light, he saw clearly. The woman standing there wasn't his Alina anymore. She had crossed every border he once set around her, and the most humbling part was this. She no longer looked at him with anger or love, only with peace. When the talk ended, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Alina bowed slightly, thanked them, and stepped off the stage. As she passed the back row, Mitchell stood. No one noticed. Their eyes met a brief, wordless moment, enough for both to understand this was not a reunion to rekindle anything. It was one to recognize how far they'd come. You spoke beautifully, he said softly. Thank you, she replied. How are you? Learning to live honestly. Good. They looked at each other, no smile, no tears. Just a quiet acknowledgement between two people who had once shared the same pain. The narrator's voice rose gently, like background music. People think reunions are for beginnings, but sometimes they exist only to prove we've truly changed. And when you can wish someone peace, the past is finally laid to rest. After the conference, the hall slowly emptied. Sunset poured through the tall windows, washing the floor in golden light. Alina stood on the balcony, holding a glass of water, watching students below take photos in laughter. A moment later, Mitchell appeared behind her. I didn't mean to intrude, he said quietly. I just wanted to thank you for letting me see myself again. She turned, the sunlight softening her face, making her seem near and unreachable. I didn't give you that chance, she said gently. You found it yourself. They both smiled, light, genuine, unforced. A breeze lifted her hair, carrying the faint scent of a memory he had once forgotten. I read your book, she said. Letters to the Woman I Failed. I didn't dare to send it directly. I know. Thank you for not deleting it. I didn't keep it to hate you. I kept it to remember that someone tried to change. Mitchell nodded slowly. If I could go back, would I do anything differently? Alina shook her head. Wrong question. The right one is, now that you can go forward, how will you live? He was silent, then exhaled, smiling with a kind of surrender. By trying to be the man you once believed I could be. Then you've already done enough. They stood quietly, the air between them lighter than ever. Below, in the courtyard, Jordan Gaines, now a young woman, stood beside her mother, Patricia. They were taking photos, laughing softly. When Jordan looked up, she saw the two figures on the balcony. She raised a hand and waved, smiling, no resentment, no distance. That girl, Alina murmured. I know, Mitchell said. Thank you for helping her. I didn't do it for you. I know, and that's why I respect you more than anyone. Alina looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, You see, Mitchell, in the end, it's all about learning to love without causing harm. I'm still learning. So am I. A quiet pause settled between them. Then Alina set her glass down. I should go. There's a meeting with the Grace Foundation tonight. You're always busy. Busy enough not to look back. She smiled, started to leave, then turned at the door. Do you know what finally made me forgive you? He shook his head. What? When I stopped thinking about you long enough to hate you. And she walked away. Mitchell stayed where he was, watching her silhouette fade into the golden corridor. A breeze rustled through, scattering yellow leaves around his feet. He tilted his head and smiled, the first genuine smile he'd worn in years. The narrator's voice closed softly, like a final note. Some people pass through our lives not to stay, but to help us see ourselves more clearly. And when you can smile as they leave, it means love has come full circle. Down below, Jordan looked up one last time. 3 figures, 3 generations stood on 3 different levels, watching one another in silence. No one won, no one lost. Only peace remained, the one thing they had all been searching for. The next morning, Seattle was damp and hushed. The rain from the night before still clung to the trees, drops glinting like small pieces of glass. Somewhere, a sparrow called. A streetcar rattled in the distance. Alina sat in a small cafe on Pine Street, the same one she used to visit on those first mornings after the divorce. The cafe hadn't changed. The smell of dark roast, the worn wooden tables, the wide window overlooking the lake. She placed 2 cups of coffee on the table, one black, one with milk. Moments later, the door opened. Mitchell walked in. He wore a grey wool coat. The tension that used to define him had softened into a quiet weariness, the kind that comes after surrender, not defeat. When their eyes met, there were no greetings, no apologies, just recognition. He looked at the coffee and smiled faintly. You still remember, I take it, black, no sugar. I remember many things, Mitchell, she said gently, but I didn't keep any of them. Silence settled between them, the clink of a spoon against porcelain. Rain is tapping softly against the window. Mitchell turned toward the glass. I read your interview in the New Yorker. You said forgiveness is the gift you give yourself. I've been thinking about that line for days. Because it's true, she said. Forgiveness isn't for anyone else. I don't need your gratitude, and I don't want your guilt. I just needed peace. He nodded, eyes glistening. I used to think maybe we'd get another chance. We did, she said. We just didn't recognize it at the time. Her smile was calm, steady, the kind that comes from someone who has already survived the storm. Mitchell, do you know the worst thing in a marriage? Betrayal? No, she said softly. It's when 2 people stay together but stop seeing each other. He looked down. She continued, almost to herself. I used to think love could fix everything. I know that sometimes love means leaving before you lose yourself completely. Her voice was low but unwavering. Mitchell swallowed. I'm sorry. I know, she said, and I accept that, but apologies don't take us back. Do you hate me? No. I just haven't thought about you long enough to hate you. The words hit him like a quiet wave, not cruel, just honest. She had already moved beyond the pain. Outside, the rain began to fade. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, pale and clean. I should go, Alina said. There's a meeting at the Grace Foundation. I heard you're expanding to California. Yes, I'm moving there. A new beginning. I'm glad for you. I know. They stood, facing each other amid the smell of coffee and wood. Could we ever start over? He asked quietly, almost pleading. She shook her head, her tone soft but final. No, Mitchell. But we can end well. She stepped closer and placed her hand on his shoulder, a gentle touch, a farewell. I wish you happiness, she whispered, just not with me. Then she gave him a brief, light embrace and let go. He didn't stop her. He stood still, watching her walk through the glass door and disappear into the pale morning light. The narrator's voice followed, tender and calm. Some embraces aren't meant to hold on. They're intended to release what once was love. And when you can let go and still feel at peace, that's when you are truly free. That morning, Alina drove out of Seattle, alone. The radio played softly Holocene by Bon Iver, the kind of song that sounds like the end of a film. On the passenger seat sat her old leather journal, the first one she'd written after the divorce. The last page was still blank. She stopped by the Oregon coast. The wind was intense, the sea pale blue. Opening the notebook, she wrote the final line. I used to think freedom meant leaving. Now I know it simply means being myself, wherever I am. She closed the journal, breathing in the salt, the wind,
the promise of a life that was finally hers. Her phone buzzed a message from Jordan. "Mom and I are doing great. We'll be at the Grace Foundation opening in San Diego. I owe you a hug." Alina smiled and typed back, "No, Jordan. Neither of us owes anything. We're just walking forward together." She put her phone away, stepped barefoot onto the sand, and let the tide wash over her feet. The sun broke through the clouds, gold spilling across the water. The final narration came like a soft exhale, the voice of closure itself. "They say some gifts come wrapped in pain, but when you open them, inside you find what's most precious: freedom, peace, and yourself." She turned back once, seeing the highway fade into mist, Seattle dissolving behind her. No anger, no longing, just a woman who finally understood. The greatest gift she ever gave herself was the courage to leave and not look back. And that's how her story ends. Not in revenge, but in peace. She didn't need anyone to beg for forgiveness. She didn't need anyone to regret. She only needed to look in the mirror, smile, and know she had learned how to love someone without losing herself.
If you've ever been underestimated, broken, or forced to begin again, remember this: you are not alone. To leave a dove below if you believe that sometimes the greatest gift in life is simply the freedom to choose your own happiness.